Well, good morning. Let me extend my welcome to worship this morning. My name's Adam Hildebrand. I get to be one of the pastors here at LVfirst. Such a privilege and an honor to be with all of you this morning. Thank you for being a part of our worship experience. We are better when we're together. I say that all the time, but it's awesome to see everyone here together, just celebrating and praising God for what God is doing in our lives and in our church and in our community. If you're joining us online, we want to welcome you as well. So glad you're joining us for worship as well. Over the last month, we've been journeying through the Gospel of Luke together, and we've invited you to read along with us, and we've been picking up some stories along the way, and we've called this series Dear Theophilus, because at the beginning of the Gospel of Luke, we hear that Luke is writing this gospel to someone named Theophilus, and what we learned is that Theophilus literally means friend of God or lover of God, and if we want to be a friend of God, we can learn about who Jesus is and how we can engage with Jesus in our day-to-day lives. We can learn to be a friend of God by reading the Gospels and hearing what Jesus invites us into, by knowing these stories and see how they change our lives. And the very first week we looked at Luke chapter 4, Jesus' first sermon. And what we learned from Jesus' first sermon is that Jesus came to share some really important things with us. That we can see the scriptures through the lens of good news, of forgiveness, of sight where we haven't seen before, or insight even into our daily lives, and freedom from all those things that hold us down, and proclaiming the year of the Lord's favor, that we are favored, that God is good, and we can celebrate God's goodness. The story I want us to unpack together today encompasses all of those things and happens towards the end of the Gospel of Luke, as Jesus and his disciples are beginning their journey towards Jerusalem, towards Holy Week, towards the cross, towards Easter, as we prepare for Ash Wednesday in the season of Lent. This story pops up in Luke chapter 17. But before we get to that, I want to tell you something that my youngest son does. It's the most interesting thing. He's one of those people who really sees people in lots of different places that other people wouldn't necessarily see them. And one of his things that he loves to do when we go out to eat is he loves to write a note on a napkin to the server and the chef. I mean, like at just normal, regular, everyday restaurants, he'll write a note to the server and the chef just thanking them for the food. I mean, he'll go to Chili's and be like, this was the most amazing triple dipper I've ever had in my entire life. Like just normal everyday food, but he just takes so much joy in it. He gets so excited about it, and he's so grateful to the people who have prepared it and who have taken the time to serve it that he has to write a note. I don't remember when this started. It started a number of years ago, but I remember specifically one of the times we were up in the mountains in North Georgia, and we were coming home from I think an event with Selah, and we stopped at this barbecue place, and it was like barbecue, like mediocre barbecue, okay? Barbecue scene wasn't real great there. It was okay barbecue. And he writes this note, and he gives it to the server, and the server takes it back into the kitchen, and out of the kitchen comes half of the kitchen staff to say thank you to Micah for thanking them. But not only do they thank him, they bring him dessert, right? So if you've ever had a stray dog hanging around your house, or like a gremlin that you fed after midnight, this is what happened. Like somehow it just encouraged him all the more. And he doesn't expect to get free dessert, though he does get it a whole lot. When we were in Montana 2 summers ago, we went to this burger place that had been featured in all these different magazines and on diners, drive-ins, and dives. And so, we eat these burgers, and they're good burgers. It was good burgers, good shakes, all the whole deal. And so he writes a note to the chef, and the server takes it back to the chef, and the chef comes out, and the chef pins it on the wall next to the picture of Guy Fieri, right? Guy Fieri, Micah's note. Same difference, right? But I think what's so special and what I've noticed about this is how much people love being thanked. How much it means to somebody who doesn't always get thanked for what it is that they do. And the ability to see those people and to see how much people need that and how much people just need to be noticed and seen is so incredibly important. I wonder how often people really experience gratitude, not just kind of the courtesy thank you, not just the one that you do at Chick-fil-A just to see how many times they'll say my pleasure. Like the gratitude that moves that's a game you can play. I just want you to know it's important. Gratitude moves beyond that. It's something deeper. It's something that says, I really see you and I appreciate what it is you bring to the world and what it is you bring to my life. And studies have been done, lots of studies about the power of gratitude. Not only in other people's lives, but in our lives. Gratitude has been shown to increase mental, physical, and social effects. Like they have good things in all of those different areas. Gratitude increases happiness, reduces depression and stress. It can lower blood pressure, boost immune system, and leads to better sleep. So there's all these benefits. It creates a better work environment. People are more excited to go to work in places where they feel thanked. What's interesting about that, and we know all that, and all of us can kind of like comprehend that, but in 2018, this group of researchers set out to do this study where they examined everyday conversations between friends, families, and neighbors in countries all around the world, and the idea was simple. They wanted to count how many times when somebody asked for something and they received it, they said thank you. On average, the requester only responded with thank you about 5% of the time. About 5% of the time. Which is why other studies have shown that nearly 9 out of 10 of us wish that we heard thank you more often. 10 out of 10 of those 9 people are all parents who wish that they heard from their kids thank you more often, right? We wish we heard thank you more often in our daily reactions. Points to the fact that unspoken understanding doesn't really apply. I think sometimes, there are lots of reasons why this is, but sometimes we almost feel a sense of entitlement to some things. We almost feel like we deserve something. You know, we go to a restaurant, we're paying for the food, we're paying for the service, we're paying $20 for that triple dipper, and so we feel like we deserve that, and we don't necessarily have to say thank you. But you can't feel gratitude for something that you feel entitled to. We can't feel gratitude for something that we feel entitled to. And even if you don't feel entitled, it really takes intentionality to notice things that we need to be thankful for. And this moves us well beyond that rehearsed thing that we do as parents where, somebody gives something to our kid and we say to them, what do you say? What do you say? What do you say? We do this time and time again so that it almost feels like the thank you is an obligation, not a gift that we get to give to somebody. Gratitude is something that we get to give to somebody. It changes us, it changes them, it changes the relationship. And so I want to jump into this story in Luke chapter 17 because it has everything to do with the way that we interact with God, with the relationship that we have with God and the way that is lived out with others as well. It starts this way in Luke chapter 17, verse 11. On the way to Jerusalem, like I said, Jesus is on his way somewhere. He's moving towards something. He's on his way to Jerusalem. Jesus was going through the region between Samaria and Galilee. These are two separate regions. Galilee was Jewish territory. Samaria was Samaritan territory. And the Jews didn't really like going into Samaritan territory, and the Samaritans didn't really like going into Jewish territory. So Jesus is kind of in that in-between place, traveling around Samaria, which is how the Jews would have gone from place to place. They would have gone around Samaritan villages on purpose because they were outsiders. They didn't do it right. The Jews felt like they were unclean, like they didn't worship in the right way. And so Jesus finds himself in this region between these two places, and he enters a village. As he was entering a village, 10 lepers approached him, keeping their distance. They called out saying," Master, have mercy on us." Jesus, Master, have mercy on us. So Jesus has all sorts of different encounters as we start to read about him moving towards Jerusalem. He tells all sorts of stories that are so incredibly familiar to us, stories that we spent a month on at the beginning of this year, the prodigal son, all sorts of different stories. He tells all these stories. He has all these interactions. And this is one of those interactions where he's going towards Jerusalem. He stops in this village, and on his way into the village, there's this group of 10 lepers. Now, lepers in this day were outcasts. They were kept outside of the village because everybody was worried about catching leprosy. And leprosy could be a whole grouping of skin diseases. It's not just necessarily leprosy. If you had any skin disease, you were kind of categorized as a leper, and you were asked to leave the community until you were clean, until God did something in your life. And there was a long history of people who were lepers being left out, being pushed out. In fact, in Leviticus chapter 13, there's like 2.5 chapters of laws about what you have to do when you're a leper. About the things that you have to do because you've got this disease, because you've got something that you couldn't control. It says, in 1345 that you have to wear torn clothes and let your hair on your head be disheveled and cover your face. And anytime somebody comes close, you have to yell, "Unclean, unclean," which I think should be a law for teenage boys. Can you imagine? Like, you've got to live outside the village. You'll live alone, and your dwelling will be outside the camp. And again, there's just tons and tons and tons of laws about what you have to do. So you have to live outside the community. You aren't allowed to get close to people. You have to stay a certain distance away from them. And when they come near, you have to yell at them that they can't come any closer. Can you imagine the sense of separation? The distance that you would have felt from people, from God. The loneliness, separation, struggle. I mean, these lepers are living difficult lives in general, but they're ostracized from community. It's not just a physical distance, a distance of connection. And they cry out, "Jesus." They see Jesus coming, and I don't know how they know it's Jesus. I don't know if they just sensed something. I don't know if they heard Jesus was coming to town. I don't know if there's like a leper network that they just sharing notes and, "Hey, Jesus is coming to your town next. Jesus is on his way here." But whatever it is, they see Jesus coming, and they say, "Jesus, have mercy on us." And if you were with us last week, we talked about this one simple prayer that can change our lives. Maybe it's the prayer that we need to pray most often, and it's just simply this one word, help. When we feel out of control, when we feel like things aren't the way that they're supposed to be, this idea of, God, just help. That's what these lepers are praying. They're praying to Jesus. "Jesus, have mercy on us." They're essentially saying, help. The Greek word is eleison. Maybe you've sang the song or read the prayer, "Kyrie eleison," before. That's where this comes from. Have mercy on us. Have mercy on us. Jesus, have mercy on us. I love what the next verse says. They cry out, "Jesus, have mercy on us." These people who are forced to live outside the village, these people who have this skin disease, who most people would have walked by because they heard them yelling, "Unclean." And it says, when he saw them, when Jesus saw them. I love this about Jesus. Because he sees the people that often get passed by, that don't feel noticed, that don't feel a part of things, that don't feel connected. He sees the people who don't get thanked, who don't get tipped, who don't get invited. He sees the people who don't have a seat, who don't get included, who feel separated. He sees those who are purposefully excluded. He sees these lepers, which is good news for all of us because it means that he sees all of us. That Jesus sees each and every one of us right where we are. No matter if we feel close to God or far away from God, no matter if we feel like we're clean or unclean, no matter if we feel like we've got it together or we're just a wreck, Jesus sees us. He sees them, and then he tells them, go and show yourselves to the priests. And as they went, they were made clean. Now, earlier in the Gospel of Luke, Jesus actually touches a leper, which was just really, really out of bounds, and he heals the leper when he touches them. This time, he heals lepers just by going, hey guys, y'all go on, go see the priest. And just a little piece of history here. In order for lepers to be embraced back into the community, in order for them to have a clean bill of health, they had to go see a priest. And generally, the priests were somewhere around Jerusalem. So they head towards Jerusalem in order to go and to see the priests and to have the priests check off on their little card that they are clean, that they've been checked out. And I don't know what part of priest school that they go through where they can look at somebody with skin disease and be like, good to go. I don't know where they went to medical school. I don't know where they did all that. But that's the way that you had to do it. You had to go and see a priest in order to be welcomed back into community, in order to be welcomed back into worship, in order to be welcomed back into God's good graces. They would have had to have the priests check off on their little checkbox, clean. And I want you to notice something really important. Jesus says, go and show yourselves to the priests. And it says, as they went, they were made clean. Who was made clean? They. Yeah, all 10 lepers were healed. All 10 lepers had their leprosy taken away. They were all made clean. And all of them take off towards Jerusalem because they know that when they get there, they can find a priest, and that priest can check the box, and they can be welcomed back into their family. They can finally get a job. They can finally do all of those things that they wanted to do. They were so excited that they take off. The story goes on. Then one of them, when he saw that he was healed, turned back, praising God with a loud voice. He prostrated himself at Jesus' feet and thanked him. So this one guy out of 10, which seems to fit the statistics that we talked about earlier, turns around and comes back. He's on his way, just like the other lepers. He is going towards the priest because he knows that that's how he's welcomed back into the normal life of the community. He comes back. He sees something has happened. Notice what it says. The scriptures say that he saw he was healed. He had unique insight. Remember, Jesus says in chapter 4 that he's come to allow the blind to have sight. And so much of our lives we're blind to the goodness of God, to what God is doing in our lives, because we're so busy on our way to somewhere else. We're so busy trying to get somewhere else. And I'm sure the other 9 guys were perfectly nice guys. I'm sure that they had the best intentions. I'm sure that they were excited to get back to their normal lives, to get that check mark and to do all the things that they had been missing out on. But here's the issue, is that gratitude is best expressed in the now. Gratitude is best experienced and expressed in the now. Right? Because oftentimes what we think is, well, I'll thank them when I get a chance. I'll send that note when I get a chance. I'll take time to think about God's blessing in my life when I have a few minutes alone. But gratitude is best experienced and expressed in the now. It's easiest to see God's work right here, right now in our lives. And the enemy of now is always when. I'll do it when. I'll get to it when. The reason that so many of us struggle to enjoy our current experiences, our current life, is because we can't see how blessed we are now because we're so busy on our way to when. We can't see God's favor in our life now because we're already in our minds on our way to when. You know when. when I get the job I want, when I get the salary I want, when I get to go on the vacation I want, the one I've been planning, when my kids are at this stage in their lives, when my kids get out of the house, when my kids have kids, when I get to retire, when I can have more freedom, when I can. And we've got all of these whens that keep us from experiencing and expressing gratitude now. Because we're always thinking about when. I'm sure the 9 guys who kept going towards the priests had so many whens in their minds. The problem is, when will never be now, because when is now, there'll always be another when. You know what I'm saying? So we have to express and experience gratitude now. When we see God's work now. When tends to be the reason we don't experience now fully. It's the reason that we aren't always grateful for the good things that we have now. It's the reason that we haven't written those thank you notes. It's the reason that we haven't expressed gratitude to that person that invested so much in us. It's the reason that we haven't paused and just thanked God, because we're so busy on our way to when. We'll do it when. But the only way we can see God's goodness is now. We got to stop running towards when and see God's goodness now. And when we see the now, we're able to see that we have so much of God's favor in our lives. There's so much to be thankful for, even if things are difficult, even if things aren't the way you want them to be. There's so much to be grateful for now. There's so much to stop for, to pause, to turn around, and to see Jesus. And he cried out, turned back with a loud voice, and he cried out. You know, that same voice that had cried out at the beginning, Jesus, have mercy. It's the same voice that cries out praises and thanksgiving to Jesus. That same loud voice sees now what God has done and praises God in that same loud voice, because seeing God's goodness in our lives takes our prayers of help and turns them into praise of thanks. Meister Eckhart, the German mystic, said it this way, that if the only prayer you ever say in your entire life is thank you, that'll be enough. There's always something to be grateful to God about. Because gratitude is our only response to grace realized. When we realized how graced we are, when we realized how good God is, the only response we can have is gratitude. We have to cry out in a loud voice. We have to say, thank you, God. Thank you, Jesus. And I don't know if you noticed his position when he's thanking Jesus. He's praying for help from a distance, but he's thanking Jesus prostrated at his feet. Expressing thanks closes relational gaps. Expressing gratitude brings us closer together. This guy thanked Jesus. What better definition of worship could there be than to sit at Jesus' feet and just say, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And even in our day-to-day lives, expressing thanks and gratitude closes relational gaps. It changes the way that we interact with people. Gratitude changes our relational aptitude, our ability to relate to others, and their ability to relate to us. prostrated himself at Jesus' feet and thanked him. And oh, by the way, he was a Samaritan. It's like the punchline of the story. Like Luke drops this in right at the end. Oh, by the way, this guy was a Samaritan. He wasn't just a leper. He was also a Samaritan. So he was like a double outsider. It's like an outsider of outsiders. But the power of thank you closes the gap that exists between these two people. It changes the power dynamic in a moment's notice. And then Jesus asked the question that should sit with all of us. Then he asked, were not 10 made clean? Where are the other 9? Where are they? Was none of them found to return and give praise to God except this foreigner? See, there's something about this story that feels incomplete. It's the reason that as parents we ask our kids to say thank you, because it doesn't feel like a complete exchange until we say, what do you say? These 9 guys are off somewhere else, and Jesus is like, where's everybody else? Where's everybody else? This outsider who doesn't worship the same way that I worship, who doesn't think the same way that I think, who doesn't see the world the same way that I think, this foreigner, this Samaritan, this leper. This leper came back and realizes something about God's goodness. Because gratitude opens the door to experience more than you even asked for. This foreigner, this Samaritan, this outsider is getting to see more of God's goodness and glory because he had enough insight. He saw that something had changed. He saw that God was good. He saw that he'd been made well, to stop on his way to when and to be thankful now. And this is what it means to realize the Lord's favor. This is what it looks like. Because God is always at work in our lives, because God is always good. There's always something to be thankful for. The psalmist reminds us in Psalm 118, give thanks to the Lord for he is good. His love endures forever. Always and everywhere. Jesus asks this question, and then he says something to this one guy who came back, to this foreigner, to this Samaritan, to this outsider. And he said to him, get up and go on your way. You can go and experience something more now because you weren't so worried about when, you were thinking about now. Go on your way. Your faith has made you well. To which seems redundant because Jesus had already made them well, right? Jesus had already healed them. Why would Jesus say to this guy again, your faith has made you well? But Jesus uses a different Greek word here than he uses earlier to describe making those guys clean. He uses the word sozo, which we often translate as salvation or wholeness. Your recognition of God's goodness in your life, your willingness to express gratitude has not just made you clean, it has made you whole. The other guys were made clean too. Everybody was made clean. Everybody got a gift from God, but only one person was made whole. Only one person could see God's goodness in a unique way. Whole is more than healed. Most of us think that when, that's what will make us whole. But we can experience it now. Because there will always be more when. But if you can't be thankful now, you won't be thankful when. And you can never actually experience when if you can't be grateful now. And so on the tables, there are some little cards that look like this. And so I want to challenge you to do something that I guarantee will bring you closer to God. If you feel this gap because of circumstances, if you feel like you're far from God, if you're crying out help from a distance and you want to feel closer to God and you want to feel like God is at work in your life when it doesn't feel like God is at work in your life, then just fill in this blank and write it on this card. God, I'm thankful for. And whatever that word is, put it on this card. And if you need to see that each and every day, I want you to take this with you. But if you're willing to share that story, if you're willing to share that gratitude, we've got a wall set up between here and the sanctuary, between the Welcome Center and the sanctuary, and you can just clip it up there so that other people can be encouraged by your gratitude as well. So that we can begin to close the relational gap between us and God through our gratitude, so that we can experience now God's goodness together. I just want you to write one word on this. Take it home if you need to take it home. Hang it up if you're willing to share. But our prayer today is simply that we would experience gratitude to God right now.